Hey everyone, welcome to the UFO live stream. So, as you know, today I'm going to have Red Pill Junkie on. He and I met in 2014, which we were just discussing a bit ago, and it's almost 7 years ago. And I think I got in touch with him maybe 3 years ago and sent him an email, but that was pretty much the only time we talked. So today would be the first time since we were at this event in 2014, and he did an interview with me. I was very grateful for that. And so he brought a perspective about the UFO subject that we don't get to hear very often because obviously living in the United States, the UFO subject is very US centric. And just having somebody from, he's from Mexico, and I believe he's in Mexico City. We'll clarify that, right, as when he starts talking. But I wanted to find out, how is the subject of ufology generally viewed there? And because we know what we always talk about here, it would be nice to have another perspective. So let me see. There was a few things I wanted to go over. If you have any questions, please make sure you have the three little stars before your sentence, so I know it'll pop out at me and that you're referring to me and wanting to ask a question. And then also, please make sure to sign up on Telegram. I know some of you have texted me trying to sign up to do the open lines, since I have that going. And I apologize, I was not able to answer any phone calls, any messages or emails sent to me during that time because I'm live, and so I can't try to do troubleshoot with somebody who has something very specific. So I hope you have a friend, neighbor, someone you know that could potentially help you out to download it. And then next open lines, which is next week Wednesday at 7 p.m., we'll get together and chat about your stories, whatever it is, UFOs, ghosts, anything metaphysical, whatever you pretty much want. So anyway, let me make sure I bring RPJ on here because I want to make sure I don't have my guests muted like I usually do. And okay, here we go. RPJ, you're on. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hello.
Okay, good
Hello,
deal.
Adnan.
All right. Well, thank you very much for being on. And I don't know how much you heard of what I was saying regarding when we first met, but it's been a while.
It is. I mean, it's incredible how time flies, like you blink an eye and it's, oh my God, almost 7 years. It's, I don't know, it's almost like more than college term.
Yes.
Definitely. We will have a doctorate in ufology if there was such a thing.
Right. Well, I wanted to ask you, so can you clarify, you are in Mexico City, correct? Or at least in a general area, because I forgot to totally ask you before we started. So this is the last thing I kind of remembered, and so sorry if that's not correct.
It's a good question because it's confusing. It's even confusing to me. Where am I? It's technically I'm part of Mexico's, I don't know, trans metropolitan area. If this was a nicer city, I will say I live in the suburbs.
Oh, okay, got it.
Which is not the case at all. I mean, I live in what is properly called the state of Mexico, which kind of like envelopes from above Mexico City, which used to be called Distrito Federal, but now it is officially called Mexico City. But the problem is that you go on the city and then you see, oh, I passed some kind of border, and I'm still in the city, but now I'm outside the city. It's kind of if you see Mexico like some kind of like a megalopolis that keeps growing and growing and growing, right, like a cancer, you will get a sense of pretty much how this is.
Okay. Well, thank you for clarifying that. So what I wanted to start out with, and generally when it comes to UFOs from the U.S. point of view, Roswell is a major point in history. The initial sightings where the term flying saucers kind of got their name, and so that's what kind of the story gets told here in the United States. Please, if there is a different point of view from anyone outside the United States, please give it to me.
About
About just
what?
the UFOs in general, like how, we know that everything kind of started in the United States, but obviously they're not just appearing in the United States.
Well, right. I mean, what is the metrics by which we determine the beginning of the UFO era? Obviously, uh, everybody knows the term flying saucers because of Kenneth Arnold, the one who had that iconic encounter with these chevron-like objects when he was flying over Mount Rainier in 1947. But does that constitute the beginning of the UFO era? What about the few fighters encounters that were occurring during World War II at the European what do you call this? What, the European theater of war, right? Why don't we use that to determine? Why don't we say, oh well, that this is something that started in Europe, or maybe we go even backwards in time. For example, I'm reminded that some people allege that the first true photograph of a UFO was taken actually by a Mexican astronomer. I don't remember his name. I think his last name was Arbol, like tree. I don't know. That was his last name, and I think it was in the late 19th century when this astronomer was taking photographs of the sun using obviously instruments of the time, and he managed to detect these obscure objects that were traversing, obviously from his point of view, traversing the surface of the sun. And some people say, well, those were probably the first time that UFOs were photographed. So why don't we use that and say, oh, that was the start of the UFO era? Or why don't we go and use events like the Fatima apparitions, which is one of my favorite um, 14 mysteries of all time. I'm a big fan of the Fatima events, and there's a wonderful book that I highly recommend called Celestial Lights that everybody should read. It was written by Joaquin Fernandez and Fina de Armada. And obviously, everybody knows that in 1917, from May to October 1917, this group, these three little shepherds, were having very unusual experiences that started to gather a lot of attention to the point that at one point there were thousands of people, that were gathered in a single place, and they observed something that to many people constitute a true UFO experience. So why don't we? Why do we talk about flying saucers? Why don't, instead of talking about Fatima experiences? And I guess the reason for it is, well, I mean, not to be too critical about geopolitical things and things like that, but it's because, for better or for worse, and I think it's the latter, the United States is the most powerful country in the world, and that is why we perceive the UFO mystery from mainly an American lens.
Well, thank you for clarifying that. And so I know there's a lot of footage one can find online, and sometimes it's difficult to tell where exactly it's because it's not always necessarily just Mexico, but you have the entire continent of South America, and Central
Mhm.
America. So to figure out where they're from, and I mean, not where they're from, where this particular video was taken, but what is the general point of view from of the average person, let's say in Mexico? What would you say is their stance on UFOs?
It's a really good question, and then it's something that people used to ask me when I began having interviews on podcasts and the such. Like, what's the difference between the point of view of the average citizen in Mexico, in contrast to people living in the United States? My answer will have to be very cautiously that there seems to be a lot more of implicit acceptance that, yeah, there are things out there that we don't really understand. Like it's a given, like you probably, know someone, your friend of a friend or a relative, your aunt. In my case, I have relatives, I have cousins, I have aunts who have had UFO experiences. My family even have had a UFO experiences when I wasn't present, which is something that really pisses me off. It's like the phenomenon is making fun of me. But yeah, there's this kind of like tacit or implicit acceptance that, yeah, there's something out there, but is at the same time not the center of a lot of interest, if you know what I mean. Like, for example, all the latest revelations that happened after 2017, when there was this, I guess now historical New York Times article describing the existence of this secret Pentagon program to study UFOs, among other things, OSAP, ATIP. That was kind of revolutionary, but I feel that the impact of that revelation was more centered among English-speaking countries, because here in Mexico, yeah, I noticed a certain amount of interest, but it's something like, okay, yeah, but in other news, like there's so much going on here with regards to more pressing matters, politics and the such, that it wasn't really taking the due, interest that maybe in other circumstances would have gathered. And I wonder, what is it that maybe not only in Mexico, but also in Latin America, people have this, they take for granted these kind of things like UFOs, ghosts, things like that. And I wonder, maybe it's because in Latin America, uh, like the culture, like forces you to live or to entertain what one might call a certain kind of like magic realism. By this, I mean this idea that reality is more than what you can perceive with your five senses. I mean, think about it. Mexico is a very Catholic country, and actually, let me correct myself. Mexico is not a Catholic country. Mexico is a Guadalupean country. By this, I mean that the main center of worship in Mexican culture is not God proper or Jesus. It's the Virgin of Guadalupe, And last year, I had my friend Greg Bishop with me, and we, among other things that we did, I took him to visit Teotihuacan. I took him to visit the Museum of Anthropology. I also took him to visit the La Villa, which is like the main center of worship of of the Virgin of Guadalupe, which is outside of the Vatican City. It is the largest Catholic center in the whole world. It's designed to house thousands of individuals. So, and if you also, if you analyze the legends of these humble Native American or Native Mexican man named Juan Diego, and how he had these encounters with this entity that he connected with the Virgin Mary. This has a lot of correlations with the UFO mystery. So and this is something that I think has always been present in Mexico. You know, these ideas, this coexistence with other levels of reality. So maybe that is the reason why when the UFO phenomenon popped up in history, Mexicans were like, "Oh yeah, sure, there's also that." You know, like, yeah, flying saucers. Why not? Uh, and we moved on, you know, to watch football or a bullfight. I think that is maybe a cultural reason why acceptance of these kind of mysteries in Latin America was easier than in countries like the United States, which has maybe some kind of like more Protestant culture, like some more, maybe more rooted on Calvinism, or more rooted on some type of positive materialist thinking, which is the thing that gave rise to the Industrial Revolution, from which the United States gathered the amount of power that allowed it to become the main country in the world. But maybe that kind of like vision that allows you to gain that kind of power also makes you hesitant to accept these kind of things that put into question your little model of reality. Like, oh yeah, you know, people are saying that they see weird things in the sky. It's probably, you know, nothing, you know.
Swamp gas.
Swamp gas, you know, they saw you know, a flock of seagulls, and now we see, whoa, they saw drones. But here in Mexico, if you hear someone say, "Well, I saw a UFO the other day," it's it's as preposterous and at the same time as easier to entertain that say, "Well, you know, my granny was sick, and I went to the church and I prayed, and then there was a miracle, and my granny was cured by God." You know, so and people say, "Yeah, sure," you know, that sort of thing happens. So maybe that's the reason why in Mexico and Latin America, this sense of magical realism allows you to kind of like grapple with all these, you know, seemingly absurd phenomena. And in a way, they are absurd. You know, they cannot. I posit that they cannot be totally understood by rationality alone. But it is easier for maybe for a Mexican to deal with this than for an American. With uh, with an American, there is this dichotomy. It's either real or it's all a hoax. There is no chance whatsoever for an in-between state. Well, maybe there's something, you know, in the middle. You know, no, it's either black or white, 1 or 0. That's very the kind of like mentality that I see more dominant in the American culture.
You know, that's interesting. I wanted to obviously hear your point of view, but one of my friends, she's from Colombia, and so I got a chance to ask her about, you know, what is it like? Like, what do people view it? And they're like, and she's kind of said very similar, you know, what you were saying, but generally within her vicinity, it's almost there's this interest, but then they go on, you know, watching soccer. You can be like, oh, your foot, that's great, you know, and then you
Mm-hmm.
know, and but it's not where here you get more of an eye roll, like, oh my god, one of those ancient history people, you know,
Right.
because that's almost what it seems like, that dichotomy, you know, is kind of split in that way, to where you're either ancient in history, everything is a possible person, you know, or you're just you know, crazy UFO, you know, person. It's just you can't almost, you cannot just have a general interest, because if you do, it's, I don't know, it depends. I mean, again, I mean, we're human beings, we're so, you know, complex, so it's, there's not just one single answer. I mean, literally would depend from situation to situation. Where you think you should be,
Right.
you would be shunned, you're not. Where you are, you know, where you expect to be accepted, you're shunned. I mean, you just never know. So
Right.
I don't want to switch, you go
And
ahead.
also let me also point out something that I wrote he was very, very interested in the UFO phenomenon. So I kind of like wondered, is it possible that, UFO obsession is, and I'm trying not to be controversial, I'm trying not to be like woke here, but is it possible that that the UFO obsession is something of a white male privilege? Like something that only if you have certain amount of comfort in your life, certain amount of stability, economic stability, you are allowed to devote some time in trying to learn about the UFO phenomenon. Because, like you said, maybe in Latin America, yeah, there are people who are too busy, like trying to make a living in these developing countries, countries that do not have the kind of wealth or political stability like in Europe, in England, in the United States. And the amount of free time that they have, maybe they only want to, like you said, watch a soccer game on TV, or watch a telenovela, like my mom, and just a few percentage of people are weird enough, like me, to take an interest in the UFO phenomenon. So that's something to people in the United States to maybe it's kind of like an uncomfortable question, but is it something of a privilege that you are enjoying, that you have the time to be interested in the UFO phenomenon?
Well, I think certainly from the meetings and all the places that I've been in the United States, and this is obviously anecdotal because I don't know anyone that has some kind of done some concrete study on it. It's actually people that generally society would consider kind of odd, and not only that, to the point to where just they're not afraid to speak their mind. So it's more
Right.
of a characteristic in that way. But it would be interesting because it would be nicer if there were those types of people, because then maybe the UFO field would kind of get like a little injection of capital to where it can develop into
Right.
something better, because instead of just having these large corporations like History Channel to be able to kind of control their narrative, and so
Right.
I mean, I've known so many people personally that some even lived in the van, and they would pull in the van to the bowling alley where we would meet. They'll come out, sometimes, I love them to death, but this thing to high heaven, and
Right.
just talk about these different things. So it's not necessarily it's a subject more of a mindset of a person, not necessarily on
Right.
that privileged, you know, because if they are privileged,
Yeah.
I find they have something different to do, or they would say
Yeah.
something better to do.
Yeah, let me clarify. It's not like, oh yeah, you have a Mercedes. If you are interested in UFOs, you must have a Mercedes-Benz parked in the garage. That's not what I meant at all. And yeah, there's the idea of UFOs and liminal ways of living is very much real. The idea that, yeah, we are outsiders of society, for better or for worse. We're not the cool kids who sat with the jocks and the cheerleaders at the high school cafeteria. We are like the guys who were sitting in the backs
Right.
talking about cool metal bands, and also talking about cool books, and talking about ideas, big ideas, the kind of things that doesn't really make good small talk during cocktail parties. If you know, uh, but we have to also acknowledge that there are a lot of people who, uh, I don't know, working on sweatshops in Hong Kong, and working 24/7, or people, yeah, maybe they're not only living in trailer parks in the United States, but they're also picking cotton, or picking oranges, 12 hours, to make I don't know, $5 an hour in California or whatever, or here in Mexico even worse. Uh, it's the kind of thing. It's the kind of thing that I think about when I listen to people who are saying that they are trying to compile databases using reports gathered by UFO researchers.
Hmm.
And they go and say, well, according to our preliminary studies, we find that the United States is the country with the most amount of UFO or UFO occupants reports. It's like, well, you know, big surprise, you're using the database from an American,
Right.
you know, and what about do you what about the people who also, like you said, have something extraordinary had happened to them, but they didn't either have the time nor the inclination to actually file a report. That's when it talking about privilege. The way that you set your life in a way that you make your time to devote it to UFO phenomenon. And sometimes people don't have that privilege. Even if they're well off, maybe they have to be very busy in order to, take the kids to soccer practice and then take the wife shopping to the mall, and then they have to work, 8 days or 7 days a week at an office for, I don't know, 8-10 hours. And when you ask them, hey, what do you think about UFO? I say, well, I don't know, like, why don't we talk about WandaVision or Falcon and the Winter Soldier instead? Let's talk about that. So that's what I refer to. There's the UFO phenomenon is definitely a niche demographic, uh, and I think that happens across nations, not only in the United States, also in Latin America, maybe even more so in places like Latin America and other countries, especially developing countries, and I think that's something that we should definitely try to correct, that the idea that, well, okay, why is it that ufology is so American centric? Why is it that we only hear the tales of American, abductees or contactees or ufologists, and we don't hear too much about what happens elsewhere? And I think that is economy, politics, and things like that have a heavy role, or a heavy influence into the reason why our databases are so skewed, our perception of the phenomenon is so distorted. It's like that that animation movie from a few years ago, I think, Aliens versus Monsters. Like, say, well, a UFO crash in the United States, the only country in the world where a UFO seems to crash. It's like, well, maybe not necessarily. I mean, we hear stories about UFO crashes in Peru or Mexico
Russia has a
or maybe
lot, especially during
Brazil.
the Soviet times.
Exactly. But we're still, like you said, if you ask people, hey, tell me about a UFO case, they will say, oh, well, Roswell. I say, okay. Is it because Roswell was the most important UFO case of all time, or is it because, due to economic influences, it's the case that people have heard the most? It's because there's the whole Hollywood apparatus that is talking about, oh yeah, Roswell and the aliens that crashed in Roswell and Area 51. Yeah, but you have all these millions and millions of dollars that are only repeating this sliver of narrative,
Mhm.
and they're leaving all this behind, and that, I think, affects our perception of the phenomenon, and also the way that people interact with the phenomenon.
Well, thank you for clarifying that. Can I ask you a quick question about what you were saying? It was, I believe, it was before. Sometimes I get things confused before we went live. You consider yourself, what did you say? You're a Fortean?
Yeah,
Okay. Can you please maybe kind of clarify what that is for those that might not have heard this before, and what does that mean?
sure. Fortean or Forteanism is a direct reference to Charles Fort, who was an American author, iconoclast, researcher, that wrote in the I want to say early 20th century, uh, a few very, very influential books. The most famous one is the Book of the Damned. Like this guy, and talking about a certain kind of privilege, Charles Fort, all he did, for a living was going to the New York Library every single day to go and read all newspapers, all books. Like spent all his time there reading and taking notes. And you say, well, he was certainly, rich. Well, no, he wasn't. He managed to inherit a little bit of money, and he decided to use that money in a very frugal way in order to pursue his passion, which was learning about these sort of historical facts that were recorded in newspaper, in chronicles of the time, but that they were kind of like swept under the rug or relegated to the sideways, like uh, uh, reigns of frogs or mysterious disappearances, or strange lights in the sky or cow mutilations, etc., etc. So this is the first guy who started to kind of like say, wait a minute, why aren't we paying attention to this? This happened, and maybe if we paid attention to these kind of like things that don't make any sense, we might learn something valuable about the universe. And in a way, he kind of like paved the road for a lot of other people that follow in his steps. And that's why a few people choose to call themselves Forteans or Forteans, depending on how you choose to pronounce it. And I, to me, the main characteristic or the main difference between someone who calls themselves a Fortean to someone who calls themselves simply, oh, well, I'm a ufologist, or I'm a cryptozoologist, or I'm a ghost hunter, or I'm a, psychical researcher, or XYZ. Those guys, they're only paying attention to this little side or little piece of the pie. And the Fortean said, wait, in order to really make sense of this, we need to take the whole pie, because all of these are related in a way that we just don't understand yet. In other words, UFOs are related or connected to UFO sightings, and are related to religious apparitions, and are related to ghost sightings, and are related to reincarnation experiences, near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, etc., etc. The Fortean said all these is connected in ways that maybe we can only glimpse very, very dimly, because our the limitations of our brains, of our understanding. But in order to understand this, we also need to take this into account. Otherwise, we're really not going to make any progress.
Oh, okay. Sorry, you cut me off guard. um, no, okay. So basically, it's what I would always use the term metaphysics. To kind of put everything into perspective. So I wanted to then ask you how much you know, and I apologize that I'm not very well versed in the things in the research and the things you've written about, but How open is the Mexican government to UFOs? Like, how much are they willing to share? Because just recently, you might have noticed, there's been a lot of little, things dropped here and there, and footage and
Sure,
acknowledgments by Pentagon, and that's
sure.
kind of big news here in the United States. But has the Mexican government always been kind of open about it?
The short answer is not really. And to elaborate on expand on that is I always get a chuckle when I see in some documentary someone saying, "Oh well, there are governments out there that take the phenomenon seriously, like the Mexican government opened the UFO files, you see," and it's like, no, they didn't. I mean, what they are talking about is something that happened, I guess, I want to say 2006 or maybe 2005. I'm not sure, probably 2006. Uh, to give a bit of historical context, the period between the year 2000 and 2006 is important in Mexican history because it was the first time that a president that was not from the official party managed to win the presidency. So that's when Mexico managed to enter democracy just in the 21st century. Before that, it was a one rule party that it was, some people call it the perfect dictatorship because they only elected a new guy to the top from this party, and all the elections were just a farce. And any kind of dissent or any kind of political adversaries, they were co-opted or silenced or just killed. So that was Mexican politics prior to the 21st century. At the beginning of the 21st century, we have our first truly democratic president, and this guy wanted to make a difference and say, well, we are going to be different from our predecessors. And that's when there was a very interesting event that happened involving uh, members of the Mexican military air forces that I think they were in the state of Campeche, which is in the southeast of Mexico, very close to the Yucatan Peninsula, very close to, well, not that close, but kind of like, if you think Cancun, well, kind of like move a little bit to the west, and you can find Campeche. So these guys, they were on patrol, and they saw, using their infrared systems, they saw what they thought they were kind of like, weird globes or objects, like they were following their plane, and they managed to record it, and it was kind of like a big thing because the president said, okay, we are going to let civilian investigators to analyze what happened, in as a matter of political transparency. Like, oh, great. So who did they choose to analyze this information? Well, none other than Jaime Maussan. Why? Because that he's the UFO guy, right? If you think, oh, the people in Mexico who are interested in the UFO phenomenon, well, there's this guy, Jaime Maussan. He's been talking about UFOs for 20 years. Let's give him the data. And a lot of scientists and academicians, they protest and say, well, he's not a scientist. He's just a journalist. He's just a show businessman. And Maussan, using his very, very questionable resources, analyzed the video, but more than more rather than actually making a scientific analysis, he used that to for commercial purposes. He used that to promote his TV shows, uh, you know, and that's when people say, well, the Mexican government opened their UFO files. Well, no, they only opened it once with that one case, and I once read something on a skeptic blog talking about how uh, high members of the military Mexican forces were so enraged by the way that Jaime Maussan had handled that case that they promised never, ever again to disclose any UFO case to the public.
Yeah.
And to my knowledge, they never did.
That's unfortunate.
Since 2006, sorry.
Well, as you're telling me that, I'm trying to debate in my head whether or not I should go down this path, but why not? It's not about disparaging somebody, but just it was I was wondering if you know, or if you do, if you want to get into this regarding this big reveal 7 years back that Jaime had, and there was quite a stir regarding that. Would you like to maybe expound on that?
Are you talking about the Roswell slides?
Yes. I don't know, for those watching, maybe you can give a little background if that's okay, just to hear it from your
I
point of
was
view.
there, man. I was there. I
Then
paid my
please do.
ticket
Please do tell
with
if
my
we're doing.
cousin Fernando, and I say, man, you want to go to the National Auditorium to go and watch Jaime Maussan talk about aliens? And he said yes, because I mean, my cousin Fernando, God bless his soul, he's also been interested in UFO phenomenon since I was a kid, And for a time, I'll be honest, he and I were very big fans of Maussan. We wanted to be part of his group of sky watchers, That's how big fans of Maussan we were, 20, 25 years ago. But yeah, I was there in 2005, or was it 2015? I think it was, right, 2015. We were there at the National Auditorium when Maussan, and the place was packed, man. This is a big theater. It's like 10,000 seats, I think, and it was packed, and everybody greeted Maussan like a rock star, like, and the guy was, he's a very good showman. There's a reason why the guy has managed to stay where he is for so long, because he really is a very good. He knows entertainment. He knows the television business. So he gave a good show. I mean, he managed to spin this thing and show this guy was Don Schmidt and the other guy. Kerry or Don Schmidt colleague, I don't remember his name. I think I never cared to remember his name. And they were talking, and they were showing also all these clips that they filmed with the late Dr. Edgar Mitchell when they went and talked to him about, oh yes, how he learned about the old folks in Roswell, about the Roswell crash and yada yada yada. And they show all these clips of supposed witnesses. And then after an hour or so of this, because this thing lasted like easily 3 hours, easily 3 hours. And yeah, I was kind of like live tweeting with my friends in the States about what was happening. It was great because some of them were actually paid for the streaming.
Oh yeah, that's right. The live
of
stream
the
was
event.
happening too.
Right, I think it cost like $20 or so. And some people were, they were having a great time, I don't know, having some beers and making a big laugh about all this. And then the moment when it happened, and they showed at last what everybody, or at least people in the know had already seen, which was this thing that looked, for all intents and purposes, like a mummy, which had already leaked because these guys were so careless. They only managed they managed to show like less than a second of the actual slide in their trailer, and someone, because the internet being the internet, managed to grab it and show it and saying, is this it? Is this what they're going to show? It just looks like, it doesn't look like a recovered alien, from a saucer crash. And that's what they showed, and then they showed what there was some kind of like CGI reproduction of the alien moving about very, very, very awkwardly, because it had very, 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 very small arms. Sorry, I had to
But no, I see
drop
what you mean. Yeah.
the mic. But it was kind of like ludicrous. And then the piece of resistance, the idea that the placard that was next to the mummy, or next to the alien. I'm also forgetting the fact that Maussan had two guys. One who was supposed to be some kind of like a doctor, a military doctor, who actually impressed me. I don't remember his name. I guess I have it on my notes. I was, writing on my journal as all this was transpiring. And this guy, like, describing the kind of like anatomical anomalies that he supposedly could interpret from these very, very blurry, Kodachrome slide, saying, well, we can see that this and this and this is very different and very strange, and doesn't really relate to what we know about human anatomy. And it was kind of impressive. Like, say, well, this guy probably knows a lot more about biology and physiology and medicine and anatomy than I do. So I have to give him the benefit of the doubt, right? And then other guys saying things about, I don't know, I don't remember, genetic analysis or something to that effect. But yeah, Maussan saying that they hadn't managed to decipher whatever it said in the little placard, you know, next to the alien, because they like focused more of their efforts in trying to connect these these Kodachrome slides to these people that supposedly were friends of Harry Truman. So you see the idea of the will to believe, like connecting the dots, going from A to B to F, just by jumping to conclusions. And to make a very, very long story short, Jaime Maussan didn't want actually to show the second slide. He was kind of like forced to, because people in the public were like saying, show us the second slide, show us the second slide. He showed the second slide when he said that the second slide was kind of like even worse than the first. It wasn't. And then, like, less than 48 hours later, uh, some people that I actually are friends with, managed to decipher the placard using software to show that it said the mummy of a child that was found at the Mesa Verde archaeological site, you know, and the mystery was over. But even after the mystery was over in the United States, Jaime Maussan was insisting that no, this is still something anomalous, and maybe even if it wasn't actually recovered from the Roswell crash, maybe it was some kind of like alien, like some kind of ancient alien that had been found by the archaeologists at the Mesa Verde site. So the show must go on, man. It's kind of like with these guys, is like there is this need to keep feeding the machine, you know, keep showing something to their public that they cannot, for once, go and say, you know what? I guess we were wrong. I guess we were wrong this time, guys. We were fooled. We had the wrong assessment. Okay, let's keep looking. No, with these guys, they like people like Jaime Maussan, they double down, and to my knowledge, I don't know if he has ever accepted the fact that the Roswell slides were nothing but some kind of like, I don't want to say it was a hoax. I think it was something that was concocted by someone who had found it and thought it was kind of interesting and show it to people who are so obsessed with the Roswell story that they jumped into those conclusions and say, oh my God, this could be proof of alien bodies recovered at the Roswell crash. And because they are so obsessed with that, they have lost all perspective, and the whole thing ballooned out of proportion. The idea of showing this in a live event at a Mexico auditorium instead of showing it to independent scientists who could have easily said, no, this is from an archaeological exhibit. This is not what you think. But no, these guys were obsessed with their secrecy, and they're not showing their cards. And I remember Anthony Bragalia uh, criticizing and attacking anyone who dare to show some kind of uh, criticism, saying, "Well, wait a minute, that doesn't look like what you want it to be," you know. So the will to believe there, it, it was wild, man. I don't know what to me. I don't regret going there, because for better or for worse, it was historical. Not the way in the way that these guys were claiming it was going to be historical. It, but it was historical nonetheless, because it kind of like went to show, maybe it was some kind of like there was some kind of like before and after in American ufology due to that event. Uh, that some people said, this is really getting out of
Right.
control. And also, it was a good example of uh, how powerful crowd efforts in the internet can be in order to solve these kind of mysteries, because this was solved by a group of independent, I don't want to say researchers, it's a group of independent people interested in the field, using social media tools and using online tools in order to go and make some kind of group effort, which in this case turned out to be very effective. And other instances in which crowdsourcing efforts in ufology have been effective have been with, it has to be said, Mick West's Metabunk, that he uses his group of skeptics in order to go and try to analyze alleged UFOs in videos. Like, for example, the video that was presented by Leslie Keane, that was given to her by this Chilean group of researchers. It's called the CEPA. It's actually an official body that is connected to the civilian Chilean Air Force, I think. Uh, Maybe I'm wrong, but it has some kind of like official capacity, and they go and they analyzed UFO cases. And there was this video that was taken by a helicopter of something that they concluded that it was a true anomalous event, a true UFO, something that it was unidentified. And Mick West and his group of crowdsourced skeptics managed to debunk it and said, no, this is just a plane that is dumping their fuel. Case closed. And one has to applaud those kind of efforts if one wants ufology to move forward, instead of just peddling stories like Maussan has done, for 25 years. One has to use these kind of tools in order to say, well, you know, this this is solved. This is a case closed. Let's move on to the next one.
I am, as we're speaking, because I wasn't really prepped or prepared. I'm kind of looking through the web to find some pictures, because this has been a while. Some people might not know what I'm referring to. I found something, but I wasn't 100% sure if that was it. Um, Will you, I mean, I hate to do this while we're live. Can I send you a picture real quick and have you confirm whether or not this one is it, so I can maybe share with everyone watching?
Sure.
Let me see. I hope this is not going to disconnect you. No, it's not. Great.
We're going live, folks.
Yeah. There you go. I just sent it to you. So what I'm trying to do is to find the.
Right. Yeah, that's our old good friend. Yeah, that's the Roswell site.
Is that it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Let me. Sorry, I did not expect to share any of this or to share my browser. Usually I have it prepped. Otherwise, it's very difficult to get it to display properly. So let's see if this is gonna work. Go to my browser. All right, sorry everyone. I'm gonna have to.
These little, alien.
Yeah, hold on
kind
one
of
quick
like,
second. I'm sorry. I
thingy.
had to. So
Sure.
everyone watching, I apologize. I'm gonna have to switch the slide, but I don't have any audio either from me or RPJ. So you're not you didn't lose the stream. Just sit tight. I just want to bring in that slide because I really would like to show you the photos. So it might go dark, but we're still here. So sit tight. Okay, there we go. We are back. And so I'm Miguel. I apologize. I said your name, RPJ. No, I was just going to say, because right now you can't see it. They cannot hear you. I'll switch you back here very soon. But this is the photo that I had just sent out. Let me see if I can maybe zoom in a little bit more. So this is the evidence in question, I guess. This is what was presented at that time. And so just to give you a little reference, what RPJ just talked about. All right, let's get back to my usual setup. There we go. And so anyway, yeah, I remember there was just a little bit of a, I wouldn't call it a fallout, but it was just a lot of people that, I mean, I don't want to name any names. It's just they're very solid researchers that later on I found out were invited to go down there, but they didn't have much information. And they were just kind of, that was the first time that they were really kind of seeing what this evidence and photo is to be analyzed. And just the fact that they went down there to look at it or research it, they were already kind of put in that bubble to say, well, you're supporting this, therefore you're a fraud with them, and it was very unfortunate because it took a while for them to kind of distance themselves from that whole fiasco.
I'll do the work for you. Where you are referring to Mr. Richard Dolan, who is actually a person that I still respect in the field, despite what some of my colleagues think of him. Yeah, I mean, Richard, to put it mildly, yeah, he screwed up because he trusted in these colleagues of him saying to him, hey, there's going to be this event in Mexico and we have this evidence that we really think is the real thing, man. Will you come to Mexico to unveil this thing? And Richard, I really think he wasn't moved by monetary reasons. He wasn't in there for the money, I think. He was there because I guess, I want to go to Mexico. I've never been to Mexico. And these guys that I trust, they're telling me that this is really important. Sure, and he was caught, in the whirlwind of it. But he was among the first to say when the evidence was finally when the evidence finally surfaced, he was among the first to say, yeah, this is not really what we thought it was. This is clearly just the mummy of a child.
Right.
Let's
Well, my
move on.
understanding was, and I don't know, I guess it's hard to describe to people that kind of are just watching. It's he was my understanding at that time, and I could be wrong. So there's that possibility too, that it was just word of mouth. We have this, come on down, take a look at it. But then it turned into this huge, like it's also a reveal. And it's almost like, well, hold on, this is the first time I'm looking at this as well. So, but they kind of
Yeah.
tagged them onto that. But because I respect Richard greatly, and it's just I remember it was just a small exchange. It was just over text about, look, I understand what you're saying. I'm behind you 100%, and I'm sorry this has happened. I mean,
Mhm.
how else is a researcher other than to go down and look at it, going to do the research, right? And so anyway, because they didn't really release it to anyone, they didn't send it to anybody else. It was like tight knit. It
Yeah,
was
exactly.
nobody knew what is this great thing that they have. So
Yeah, they
anyway,
were so obsessed. They were so obsessed with trying to keep a lead on this, Adnan, that you're right. They didn't. They tried to not show it to anyone. They didn't even show it to Richard until he was in Mexico, and this is one of the reasons why you and I hate to say it because people say I'm being overly critical, but this is one of the reasons why ufology is a
right.
pseudoscience because it doesn't follow proper scientific protocols. And one of the proper scientific protocols is you show your evidence to peers in order for them to break it apart, to
Right.
to
Yeah. If you're
go over
claiming
it
that you
with
have
with
something
yeah.
physical, or whether it's photographs, artifacts,
Yeah,
whatever. Well,
yeah.
anyway, so I wanted you to talk about it because it happened in Mexico. It was where you
That's
were at, and so I figured from a first eyewitness perspective, who else to talk about it, but that. So I appreciate you kind of going into it. I didn't intend for this to kind of become a larger segment, but thank you for sharing what so far what you know.
yeah, my pleasure.
So anyway, um, what about the past year and a half? How has this with the onset of COVID and all of this? How has that affected the field? Can you maybe talk little bit about that? And specifically in Mexico, is there still you know still happening? So it's just everything just kind of come to a stop.
Uh, like I said, there was a time when I was a big fan of Jaime Maussan, and I used to watch religiously his TV shows. I mean, Tercer Milenio, I think is still the name of his show, the Third Millennium. Uh, I don't watch it anymore. I think I have better things to do. But nevertheless, I feel that Mexican ufology has, like American ufology, it's only like looking to what's happening in the United States. You know, like Maussan is making use of uh, the revelations that came thanks to or due to Tom DeLonge and his To the Stars Academy of Science, which no longer exists anymore, by the way. And not a lot of people talk about
Oh,
that.
please do,
Uh,
because I feel like I'm in the dark because I had no idea. Again, I don't follow necessarily other
mhm.
groups in that way. If you can share any info for anyone watching, I appreciate it.
Well, I mean, I think it was by the beginning of the year when Louis Elizondo, who was or supposedly was, depending on how you want to address it, he was the director of this Pentagon program, the ATIP, aerial identification threat, something to that effect. I don't know. I don't remember the acronym, but he went to coast. I think he went to talk to, I don't know if it was, I think it was George Knapp, and he told it very casually that he was no longer associated with Tom DeLonge and To the Stars, which was like, what? Because everybody thought that To the Stars was going to bring us not only disclosure, but they also were kind of like alluding that among their plans was to develop man-made UFOs. I mean, that's the thing that they showed during their October 2017 launch. There was this really cool rendering of these really weird, very futuristic craft that was wingless, that had kind of like a big, like a donut in the middle, and To the Stars, insignia in the fuselage was very, very cool. And then came the pledge, please invest, in our little enterprise, and a lot of I guess a lot of people did give them money. I don't know how much, because at one point in their when you visited their website, you could see how much they had managed to gather, like because I think they had a $6 million goal, and by the end of the first month, it was clear they were nowhere near their goal. So at one point, that thing of the amount gathered disappeared from their website, and they just the pledge to invest in their I don't know, want to say it was it a company? I don't know. I mean, anyway, Lou Elizondo, then, yeah, because he's kind of like he's always never very clear with what he has to say, but then, yeah, he clarified, yes, we're no longer, me and Chris Mellon and the other guys were no longer involved with To the Stars, because To the Stars is pretty much now focused on the entertainment side of the project. They're only going to make, I don't know, books, movies, comic books, whatever. And so this is not what they wanted to do, apparently, Louis Elizondo, and they decided to say goodbye to Tom, and that was that. And I don't know
Okay,
what
well,
else can be
yeah,
said.
no,
I
thanks
mean,
for clarifying it, because I was not aware. I was not aware at all.
mhm.
But thank you for going down that direction, because I kind of immediately when you said that, I'm like, what? So anyway, I apologize. The original question that I had then was regarding the what this past year and a half, 2 years has pretty much done to the ufology field in Mexico. So I apologize. You started out with that, and
Sure,
then when you said that, I was like, you got to talk about that first.
sure, and I don't mind the deviation, Adnan, because to be honest, I feel that the UFO field in general began to be kind of like absorbed by the gravity field of To the Stars for the last 2.5 years. If you go, and I actually did that, if you go and use the Google tools to try to check the kind of keywords that have been used um, in online articles, that you see that after 2017, the spike that you can observe with the keyword UFOs and To the Stars, and it rises dramatically. So everybody, not only in Mexico, everybody and elsewhere in the world, we're starting like looking at what's going over there. What's going over there with the gringos. What's going over with that, like, I guess they say that Tom DeLonge is going to give us disclosure. Okay, and everybody's was like crossing their arms saying, okay, yeah, I guess we'll just wait for these guys to let's see what happens. Or maybe other people who are more in the know of what really is going on with the UFO field, or also waiting to see what was going on with this new development in ufology as a social or sociological movement. Because yeah, it's very interesting how the expectations of the field began to changed dramatically after the 2017 New York Times article. I mean, I'm old enough to remember, Adnan, how in old times ufology, when people talk about the government, they were considered to be the bad guys, the CIA, the FBI. Yeah, those are the guys who are uh, keeping things from us. They are the baddies. But
Right.
isn't it interesting that after 2017, because of Tom DeLonge and because of Lou Elizondo, now, yeah, uh, the government guys are the good guys. And maybe not, it's not just because of Elizondo. Maybe I don't want to be too political here, and some people, kind of resent when ufology crosses with politics. Although it is my opinion that everything is political, especially UFOs. But even with what happened in the United States with the Trump administration, the perception of agencies like the FBI and the CIA also shifted dramatically. You know, from being the bad guys who are keeping things like, I don't know, the crimes that happened during the Iraq War, Abu Ghraib, and all those things. Remember all these things that Edward Snowden and that Julian Assange uncovered with the WikiLeaks. And there was this perception, right? But after that, with the Trump, the government became the good guys again, and I think that Tom DeLonge played a role in that. And I mean, even if you go and listen to the origin story, if you wish, of To the Stars, Tom DeLonge went to these guys in the know and knocked on their doors, and said, "Hey, you have a perception problem with the younger audience, and I can help you with that because you need someone like to clean your image so you can go and recruit new blood, younger people to fill in your ranks. And I can provide that service for you." And that's why, according to him, that's why To the Stars came into being. So yeah, there is a lot of perception management going on with the UFO field in the last 2 years and a half since the 2017 story dropped. And I feel that all these To the Stars, ATIP, OSAP, uh, the new the 2004 Nimitz event, the Tic Tacs, Commander David Fravor. This is all we've been talking about for the last two, 3 years. And to be honest, I'm kind of tired of it, man.
Hmm.
I'm so effing sick of seeing those goddamn grainy black and white videos of the Tic Tac, the gimbal, the thing. I'm so tired of it. The only thing that is good about it now is that after To the Stars dissolved, you no longer have to endure seeing those clips with their watermark on top of it, on the upper left corner. Now anybody can, put their own watermark because it turns out it wasn't proprietary. They actually admitted that everybody can make use of it.
Right.
But yeah, I'm kind of tired of this. There's some kind of, in my opinion, there's some kind of stagnation that is going on because everybody's so expectant of seeing, oh my God, this UIP task force report that is coming anytime now, and it's going to be so amazing, and it's going to be, everything we ever wanted, and the government is finally going to reveal to us that UFOs are real and that we're not alone, and all these things will be believed. So we're going to go and grab our tablet or grab the newspaper and go to our that girlfriend that left us in our last year of college, because we were weirdos, because we were believing in UFOs. We're going to show it to her and said, I was right.
Right, right.
That's what
Well, you,
everybody wants.
right. Well, I think talking about different perspective, earlier, because there's of course that stagnation in that way, because after a while, as a researcher, if you're collaborating with other people, it does get to a mundane point to where how can we move past a certain point? Because I mean, Roswell still gets brought up all the time, and again, I mean, there's still new people all the time that still, because I mean, I've had friends that just recently, would just kind of, I don't know what happened in their lives, but they would reach out to me. It's like, hey, have you heard of so and so? I was like, yes, I've interviewed them. Go check out my site. It's just like, oh wow. So and then they'll talk about different stuff, and then some even would meet other significant others, and then they're into that, so they kind of drag them down that rabbit hole, and then they get enthralled with it. And so anyway, it has different ways of, I guess, in a way it has as for some people it's already old news and mundane, and for others it's like this brand new world that just opened up, and it's so still out there, and all these possibilities and probabilities, they're kind of like that, they have that twinkle in their eye where a lot of us have lost it after 20 years or so, and but anyway, what I was just going to say, it does depend on how you also look at certain things, because I found myself, when you have the physical, and I'll talk about it often, when you have the research nuts and bolts, it can get to a stagnated point of view. But when you've had experience on your own, it leaves you with many doors open that you can now explore and kind of go with, because it leaves you with certain feelings and understandings about the phenomena where you go like, wow, this is big. And then you can go this route, that route, or that route. But usually it's a lonely route. It's some people stop at, I've had an experience and I don't know how to deal with it, to I've had the experience, I learned from it, and now learned more, and it just has so many different varieties. So it depends on which category you're in. You're either stagnant and not moving, or you're kind of very far out there to where might as well be alien to everyone else.
Right. I mean, it's the rabbit hole, right? To use a metaphor from one of my favorite films, The Matrix.
Mm-hmm.
It's the rabbit hole, and the rabbit hole is different for everybody, Adnan. Yeah, there are people who have maybe an amazing experience. I want to think of, I don't know, Joe Simonton, the famous chicken farmer who received the alien pancakes from these, he called them Italian looking, small guys that, requested some water from him, and he go and he filled his silver pitch of water, and then they gave some kind of like burned out cookies in return, and the guy, try that, and they say, yeah, well, these guys came down, and they wanted water, and they gave me these crappy pancakes that taste like crap, and that's that. And the guy probably moved on with his life. And there are people who have probably less dramatic experience. I've never had a true, really, really interesting UFO sighting. I've seen things in the sky, once or twice. I'll say, yeah, maybe that was something, but nothing really, conclusive that, oh, what I saw was a true UFO. No, never. I'm sure if I had something that was a tenth of the experience of Joe Simonton, I would be like Hugh Hefner, man, not with nails this big, no, like
Right.
jars full of peas all around me, like reading everything I could about aliens, because that's what happens with some people. Some people get obsessed with it to the point that it really disrupts their life. Maybe they had a very good job, a very stable marriage, they had a couple of kids, they have a relatively happy but uneventful life, and then something like this happens to them, and it turns everything upside down, and then all of a sudden they're living in some crappy motel because their wives left them. They were fired. They lost custody. They don't have any money. They're drinking too much, or maybe they're shooting. Well, let's not get into details, but their lives totally ruined by this. And there are also people who maybe they were totally uninterested about things beyond their small, little, simple, gray lives. And something like this happens, and then everything is changed, and maybe they're interested in other things, and maybe even they are transformed in ways that are very, very interesting, and we can't really comprehend fully yet. There are people who, after a UFO experience, they develop psychic abilities, right?
Hmm.
Or they develop artistic abilities, and or they are become interested in things like reincarnation. And maybe these people were only, people who went to church on Christmas, or maybe weddings, funeral service, and all of a sudden now they're interested in philosophy and spirituality and maybe even magic practices, esotericism. And that is, to me, what is more interesting about the UFO phenomenon, how it can transform people in ways that very few things in life can do, like maybe an ayahuasca experience if you go that route, or maybe a near-death experience if you happen to survive that. That is, to me, what is more valuable about UFOs, not trying to determine the propulsion system or the materials they're made of, or what the planets or stars. I don't give a damn where UFOs come from. I'm more interested in how they transform us.
Well, that's a great segue to actually what I want to do. A few things first. Thank you again very much for being on. So for those watching, it's the show. Obviously, it's very different than what I would usually do that, because I just wanted to have an outsider perspective about what is actually going on. So this is what this kind of show is about, and Miguel obviously came to mind. And so the other thing that I wanted to say is I'm going to ask one more question to kind of as a follow up, but also for those watching. Please go ahead, start. If you have any questions, please start typing them up so I can see them in the queue if you have any for RPJ. And so also, while you're watching this, or maybe after this, check out the description below. It'll have the, what is that? Tell me again, RPJ, was it the Grail? What was it again?
Yes,
Sorry.
the Daily
The Daily
Grail,
Grail. And
WW. Yeah,
yeah, it's in the description, and then there's the other website that you gave me as well.
Oh, Absorbed by Design, which is my personal website, which is kind of like I don't know, it's more an art gallery,
Right,
than an actual. You don't see a lot of articles there because that's not their main
right.
function.
Okay,
But it's still,
right.
something that is dear to my heart.
So please check it out. So because I don't know, are you RPJ? Are you good? Can I just ask you another question and then for us to do some Q&A, or how do you feel
Sure.
energy wise? You good?
Sure.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
I may want to go for a refill.
Okay, good deal. Well, when you do that, let me. Do you want me
Sure.
switch you? I'll switch you out, and then when you going to leaving right now?
No. No. Let's go. Let's. If there are questions,
Okay.
I'll be happy to answer.
All right. So anyway, so please remember, put the 3 stars before your sentence, so that way I know it's a question for the guest. So I know this is probably going to open up RPJ, going to open up a whole new I guess I don't know, a barrage of things to cover, but because it's probably, I feel like it's a subject that it can be gone into for hours on end. Regarding the very thing you just described about these experiences that have been gotten from these different encounters, UFO encounters, is there any prominent stories that you are aware of that originated from Mexico? And we always know the ones from United States, but can you share some that are from the Mexican point of view about certain experiences that are kind of made themselves known over the years?
One of my favorite UFO cases of all time. I mean, we're talking about giving more credence to pilots, right? Airplane pilots, because these are people who are more trained about perceiving things visually, and they are we think of them and justifiably to be more reliable than the average yo in the streets. And one of the cases that I'm more fond of, involving a Mexican pilot, happened, I want to say, 1977 or 70. No, it was 77. Happened in 1977 with a young pilot called Carlos Antonio de los Santos. This is a guy who was starting his pilot career. He was just like before before flying the big planes, you first need to like cover a certain number of hours piloting smaller planes, until you get enough experience, right? That's how the thing goes with that kind of career. And this is a guy who was flying from Cihuatanejo in Mexico, is in the state of Guerrero, is southwest of Mexico, and maybe if you are a fan of the movie The Shawshank Redemption, you probably heard Cihuatanejo said by Morgan Freeman or Tim Robbins. So this guy was flying from that place back to Mexico City, in a small Piper airplane, and suddenly he saw from his cockpit window these objects which were kind of weird, which were kind of like small, circular in shape, kind of like opaque gray in texture, and had like a polarized cockpit, kind of like tinted glass, so you couldn't really see inside of it, and they were kind of like hovering, coming very silently, two from each side of his plane, and coming near him, and like positioning themselves right above his the wings of his plane. And then a third one came like right in front of him, and dived, beneath his plane, and actually, according to him, it scraped the plane. He could hear, a metallic noise provoked by the object colliding with the underside of the airplane. And then he realized that he could no longer control the airplane. The joystick or the controls were not responding. And these objects were like took control of his plane for a number of minutes. And imagine the kind of like panic that this guy uh, experienced. And actually, you not only can imagine it, you can actually listen to it. If you go, you can actually find the recording of this guy using his radio to contact the Mexico airport's radio tower, and you can hear this guy talking and saying how he had lost control of his plane, and that there were these objects that had took control of the plane. You can actually Maybe later, Adnan, I can send you the link, or maybe you can, if you can, type the name of the guy, Carlos Antonio de los Santos, and you put UFO or OVNI event. I'm sure you can find it. It's a small recording, but it's the guy talking and saying, "I'm no longer controlling my plane. I lost control of my plane." And this happened, and after a while, the objects departed. Apparently, they fled en route to, I think he said they were moving toward Mount Popocatépetl, which, if you are aware of UFO events in Mexico, you might know that Mount Popo, which is an active volcano near Mexico City, there's a lot of recorded UFO activity in that area. There's a lot of because if it's an active volcano, there are cameras always recording the volcanic activity, and sometimes those cameras record mysterious lights that sometimes go inside the volcano, and people and scientists say, well, that's probably some kind of meteorite. I'm not so sure about that, but anyway, back to Carlos Antonio's story, yeah, those objects departed, and the guy, with the help of the authorities from the Mexican airport, managed to land his plane. And afterwards, there was this big report, this big investigation about what happened, and it was determined that the radar operators from the radio tower in Mexico City did detect some kind of like a blip moving away from Carlos Antonio's plane, moving toward that direction. So what he said was actually validated, but by radar data, which is to me something very interesting, and also the idea that there was a physical analysis of the plane, and yes, it was shown that it had suffered some kind of like collision in midair that had actually affected the landing gear, which was the reason why he had so much trouble landing the plane. And also, it was determined that the guy hadn't been drinking, hadn't been taking any kind of like drugs. He was in good health. He wasn't lying. He had no reason to lie, and they determined that whatever it is, something strange happened, and they let the guy keep flying. So another interesting thing about this fantastic case is the fact that Dr. J. Allen Hynek came to Mexico at the behest of Don Pedro Ferriz. Pedro Ferriz was like the father of Mexican ufology. He's one of my personal heroes. And Hynek learned of this case thanks to Ferriz, so he came to Mexico to interview Carlos Antonio. And the first time they had agreed to meet, so Hynek could question the guy, he didn't arrive. They didn't know what happened to him. And later they found out that he had been actually menaced by some sorts of men in black. And they threatened him and told him to keep quiet. And to my knowledge, this is one of the few cases of alleged MIBs that happened here in Mexico. So this is one of the reasons why I find this case so fascinating. To me, this is way better than what happened with David Fravor. If you want physical evidence about the existence of UFOs, this case has more evidence about UFOs than those goddamn Tic Tacs,
Right.
And to me, yeah, this is one of my top 10 UFO cases of all time.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that. I really appreciate it. And again, it's one of these things that we don't get to hear very often. That you have very not same but similar stories going on. Also, than obviously in the United States, but good to know, or at least I don't know if it's good to know. It's it's nice to share that it's not just happening here, because sometimes you
Exactly.
can develop an egocentric point of view when you think it's just all about you, when it comes to US. So anyway, thank you for that. Again, everyone, if you could, if you have a question, please make sure you put the three stars there so that it pops out at me. You guys have been awesomely busy today, which is great. But sometimes when there's too much chatter going on, I can't discern who's asking what. But here we go. So this question is, and I have not heard him say this name, so I'm going to probably butcher it, but it's Fabrice. And I believe he said he was in France, which is really late there right now. So I think it's pretty cool that he's still up listening, or watching in this case. The question he had says, question to Miguel. Sorry, RPJ, LOL. Can you see soon a possible platform where the US and Mexico can work together?
With regards to UFOs,
I think that's what he meant.
I mean, wouldn't that be great if there was some kind of like a pact or kind of like a treaty? I mean, we have commercial treaties like in North America. We used to have NAFTA. Now we have another kind of like commercial agreement between United States and Canada and Mexico. And wouldn't that be great if there was some kind of like, hey guys, let's share data, shall we? If these kind of things happened, although I fear Fabrice, I hope I'm saying your name correctly. I fear that with these kind of things, with the UFO phenomenon, the situation has always been very unilateral. Like if something happens in Mexico or in Brazil or in Argentina, then the Americans demand all information and data, or maybe even immaterial evidence, to be sent to them. And the Latin American authorities, they say, yeah, sure, whatever you say, senor. and they never hear anything about it because, well, the Americanos, they know probably what's best. They have better equipment, they have more resources. So and I feel that for the majority of the governments of this world, the UFO phenomenon is such a nuisance that to have someone to say, let me get this off your back, you don't have to worry about this, you just give it to me. They will say, thank you, sure, here you go, instead of trying to deal with it, So I think that's what has happened in the past with regards to the UFO phenomenon. And I don't know, I don't see if something could happen that could change that, unless maybe, and this is, I'm putting my speculating cap here. Maybe if this new report that is going to be presented ends up saying, yeah, we have evidence that uh, adversaries to the United States and even to other countries like the Chinese and the Russians are threatening our airspace, our borders, and we need more information. We have this drone problem that we need help to solve, and maybe even the Americans saying to the Mexican authorities, "Hey, we have evidence that, I don't know, the cartels are using drones in order to uh, drop their cargo of narcotics uh, through the borders. So therefore, we need you guys to help us detect, if there's something anomalous happening between the American Mexico border with regards to, anomalous things in the sky." That is to me, the only way in which maybe the Mexican government will say, yeah, well, okay, we'll help you,
Okay.
Uh,
Boy, I have so many follow-up questions, but otherwise it'll just take us down another tangent. And I wanted to go ahead and ask him this question, but man, it's tempting. But I'm not going to go. I'm not going to do it. So this other one, this other question is from Hazel. I believe at one point she says she's in Spain right now. So the question is, what is your gut feeling for the next couple of years? And I'm assuming it's also regarding this UFO phenomena.
such such a great question. So difficult to answer. I mean, if you had told me in 2016 that there was going to be articles about UFOs appearing in the New York Times, I would have laughed out loud and said, no way, man. No way. Like, get real. Uh, I don't know. It's difficult. I mean, sometimes the cynic part of me feels that this whole new social attention about UFOs is going to eventually fizzle out because let us remember this new interest in UFOs is kind of like, I don't want to say it's artificial because apparently there has been UFO or UAP related events happening after 2017, but there's not been any kind of like one of those UFO waves, like happening in a certain heavily populated area of the world, like like what used to happen. I want to say in the New York state in the late 1980s in the Hudson Valley area when people used to see these boomerang type giant UFOs, or in Belgium in the 1990s. This is a case that it was back in those days. There was a lot of interest about UFOs because of that, or what happened in prior to the fall of the Soviet Union because of the 1989, 1990, 1989 landing in Voronezh, right before the fall of the Berlin Wall. There was this case of a landing of a UFO near a park where children were present, and there was this giant cyclops coming, and one of those like shot something, and one of the children disappeared, and it was wild. Like, what is going on? There hasn't been something like that happening, so without that, it's very difficult for people to keep an active interest in the UFO phenomenon, for long periods of time, except for us weirdos who are passionate about it. Most people move on with their lives and say, well, let's just check the new episode of I don't know, The Mandalorian, whatever. So maybe a new UFO wave will happen somewhere. Maybe there will be some amazing case happening in a few days or maybe tomorrow. Nobody can say for certain. Or maybe the interest will fizzle out. It's hard to tell. I mean, not to be too grim about it, but if there is a war in Ukraine starting next week, people will start to really, really don't care too much about UFOs.
Yeah,
You know what I
priority
mean?
shift. That's for sure.
Priority shift, and let's remember what happened last year, guys. Last year was for the history books. You are going to, if you manage to if we manage to survive, knocking on wood, we're going to tell our grandkids what it was like to live in 2020 when we were all had to be quarantined in our houses And when we had to get out, we had to use these face masks in order to try to remain from infecting each other, you know, and 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 the way the economy is going, and also, I mean, climate change. It's difficult to ascertain what will happen. I mean, people think, oh, maybe the UFOs will land tomorrow. That will be great, but I'm not counting on that. This is what people in the United States right now are obsessed with disclosure, you know, which to me is the more asinine and the more, stupid uh, trend that has been surfaced from ufology. That the idea of waiting for the people who have lied to you for decades to finally tell you the truth and say, yeah, you know what, you were right all along.
I was going to
It's
ask you
like,
about that, like especially with there was early in the chat in the very beginning, somebody wrote
yeah,
something about countdown to the 180-day revelation of something that they signed. But if for some weird reason they actually are serious this time, which I personally doubt it, don't you think it'll kind of set a different mood for the rest of the world once the United States, if the United States changes their tune?
I'm not sure. And I'm not sure because the United States is no longer calling the shots in the world. The way they used to 20 years prior. You know, you remember Jerry Maguire, the beginning of the movie Jerry Maguire. The United States still, you know, setting the pace. That's no longer the case, man. I mean, again, not to be too political about it, but after Donald Trump, the rest of the world like looked at each other and said, "Yeah, I mean, we are not going to look for them to them for guidance." You know, like we're on our own. Like the United States left the Paris Climate Change Agreement. The United States threatened to leave the World Health Organization. It was kind of like, I mean, I guess it's very cliche to say, but it kind of feels like the fall of Rome, and the rest of the world is going to say, well, I mean, we are not going to look for the Romans to tell us what are those, you know, shields in the sky are, you know. So if tomorrow President Joe Biden were to appear on, in front of the White House and said, "My fellow American citizens of the world, you know, I am here to announce that we have finally discovered that we're not alone in the universe, and we are in fact being visited by, you know, intelligences coming from somewhere in the universe." It's kind of like, well, imagine if a representative of NASA were to have also a press conference telling us that NASA has detected an asteroid that is going to hit the Earth and destroy the world 5 years from now. I guarantee you, after that announcement, 40% of or 30% will believe that announcement, and the rest of the world will say, "Nah, that's bullshit." You know, that's fake news. You know, when was the last time that we trusted implicitly on what politicians told us? You know,
Right.
when was the last time that we trusted implicitly in what mainstream news told us? That is the reason why alternative sites like Breitbart News or Alex Jones Infowars rose into popularity because there is such a distrust of official institutions. I mean, the world is in such a disarray, you guys. We don't believe in anything anymore. I mean, think about it. There are people, maybe there are not too many people now, but there are still people in the United States who think the earth is flat. What do you say to that? And then you think that there will be something said by anyone that everybody will believe in? I don't think so, unless there was some kind of like tangible evidence, right? Like, yeah, everybody can see, like in the movie Signs, M. Night Shyamalan Signs, which actually is a really good movie. If by the third time you see it, you begin to appreciate it. But if like in the movie Science, everybody could go outside and see, like the UFOs out there, nobody will implicitly believe in anything said by anyone, without some kind of like tangible proof. That, and unfortunately, with regards to the recent revelations, there hasn't been any kind of compelling evidence coming forward. Like I said, those videos, the FLIR one, the Go Fast, the gimbal, they're, yeah, kind of interesting, but in the end, they're kind of crappy too. Nobody will give a damn about the Tic Tac UFOs if there wasn't someone like Commander David Fravor saying, yeah, I saw them, they were real, they were not, uh, of human origin. Nobody will give a damn about it. So we are still, and I also happen to believe, by the way, that that evidence has been doctored or edited in such a way as to being deliberately ambiguous. What I mean by that is that they keep telling us, oh yeah, and some people actually, that video was actually longer, or someone managed to get a better glimpse of that object, which was much clearer and left no doubt that it was a true UFO. So far, none of us has seen that evidence.
Right.
We only seen seconds of something, some blurry pixels that's is there, and oh, now it's gone. Or things that moving and say, well, it's rotating and and then there are skeptics like Mick West who are, I don't want to give him a hard time. I mean, he's right to say, I only have these to work on. I I haven't seen the rest of the evidence they supposedly have kept somewhere, you know, that they haven't provided because of reasons of national security. So, with that in mind, I see this and I don't buy it. And you know what? We shouldn't buy it either. It's really, this evidence is really, really underwhelming.
Right. Right.
And I don't know what, I guess I'm ranting right now. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I feel that, getting back to the original question, where will we be? I don't know. Maybe some big revelation will come in. I don't think so. I rather live my life not expecting, not expecting anything from people uh, on high positions of the government. I don't really feel that the UFO phenomenon moves that way. I don't I don't believe in revelations or disclosures that happens from the top down, like trickle down economics, that never
Right.
works.
Right.
I believe in a kind of like grassroots contact with this non-human intelligence, that instead of talking to Prince Philip, the late uh, husband of Queen Elizabeth, instead of talking to Neil deGrasse Tyson or Stephen Hawking, they prefer to talk to make contact with chicken farmers, housewives, people living in trailer parks, and they interact with those people in order to have some kind of influence on our society from the bottom up. And that kind of influence, yes, it takes a long time to make a shift in our culture.
Right.
But guess what? I think those guys have all the time in the
Right.
world.
Well, Miguel, I certainly appreciate your, your opinion and your perspective and your point of view. Just something about what you were saying earlier. I was gone for about, excuse me, for about 2 years altogether. Because for one, where we were living is a very small space, and our family's expanding. So, and what I was trying to do just wasn't going, and then just intuitively kind of like, okay, we need more space. Well, there's always, the monetary issues and all that, but I never let that
Right.
really like get to my head. It was like, well, I'll just build what I need, and so there was this talk, and I'm like, all right, I want to build this studio I'm sitting in right now. And it took me about a year and a half because with some help with my father-in-law and whatnot, we were able to, he helped me with, he built houses for like 30 plus years. So I was,
Mm.
whatever I was doing, he could kind of confirm about, yes, go ahead, do it like that. And yes, the foundation will be great if you do this and that and so on. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is my mindset was in a totally different environment. I was basically kind of building the next thing, which turned out to be this, and it took a
Mm.
while, but I was focused on that. When I came back, it was very polarized, very polarized because I felt like I was kind of like, no pun intended, dropped on a foreign planet. And there was all these things going on to where people were talking about things that I just didn't agree with, but I didn't understand where it came from, and
Mhm.
this could go both ways. I'm being center based and elusive on purpose. And so I had to kind of make a decision like, okay, I've now lost half of my friends, right? Because, well, they're
Mm.
strong willed, I'm strong willed. So this is how it's going to be. But I saw it also go into literally like into knitting groups. They would like separate themselves between this, left right issue. And I saw
Mm.
that unfortunate split happening. And I was like, how are we ever going to get together, figure out anything if we can't agree on something? So I just made it I certainly always want everyone and any of my guests to just say whatever is on their mind, because that's what I want for them to truly speak on it. Just when it came to me personally, I just wanted for that platform to be that open. It doesn't matter whether it's whatever the issue is that's on the guest chest, for them to say it, because I didn't want to have then another platform that divides again. Because
Mhm.
everywhere I looked, like the knitting groups and all the like Facebook was split. Even I called up some of my friends in St. Louis to UFO meetings, and like half the group stopped showing up because they were on a different aisle. Whatever that aisle is doesn't matter. The point here is that this, talking about this huge shift that was literally affecting everyone in the United States. I don't think the outside world truly understands what that means. Like I almost feel like it's like a birth of something new. I know, and even
Right.
I even feel like the news is not even covering it properly of the sentiment of the actual day to day people, about how polarized it is in the United States, And so anyway, it is a very questioning point of view, like how we're going to move on, And so I just kept thinking, well, you know what? I'm just going to have guests on, and talk about, tell me more about UFOs, share the experience, because by sharing an experience, that connects us with that humanity. And so, that somebody can relate, whether it's a struggle, whether it's something happy or whatever. But the second you get into that headspace and, kind of help divide in a way, not you, I'm talking about in general,
Sure, sure.
help divide. Now, all of a sudden, you get this, you can't come together to work on something,
Mhm.
because I even had some people in my life where I said, look, I know we're not going to agree, but what does that have to do with us? Like right here, right now, where we are, we're kind of in our own little heaven. And now we used outside forces and outside information to now split us apart. And so, like, if we could do this, it'll be silly. It's kind of like being on an island where I have my side, you have your side, and don't talk to me, but I'll survive on my own, you survive on your own, And
Right.
that was kind of the bridge I was trying to gap, because I was like, if we keep going down this route, we're not going to be speaking with each other. I'm like, do we need this here? I mean, we're literally the only neighbors together, you know,
Sure.
and
Oh,
we're like so far away from the rest of the civilization, but we're gonna, you know, I said, why don't we come together and enjoy things that we do? It's like, I like hanging out. You like hanging out. Let's do it. You like to watch movies. I love to watch movies. Let's hang out, you know, and just find these things again to remember that we were friends once, you know, we
sure.
were family members once, you know, we were together and close with each other once, you know, and kind of getting back into that, because it is kind of, you know, very uncertain, especially we're about to, in about a month and a half, we're about to have another child. And you know, it's like, you know,
Congratulations.
thank you, but it's kind of as a father, you know, especially having had the experience of a war breaking out in Bosnia, you know, and then fleeing
Yeah,
when I was a child. I don't wish that, you know, for my children
right.
to have that experience. So it's like, as a parent, if I can say something that might help bridge a gap to prevent it, because you know, it's fine to be mad, you know, but and you might even have really bad thoughts towards some other people, but those thoughts will not get you anywhere, because eventually once you cut something, you know, in your head that now this person is your enemy and you cannot go back to that, it destroys everything. Like, I hate to say it, but it's like the Braveheart movie where he says, war is what he says, war is something our children will learn of, you know, will be fought, you know, on
Right.
the streets. They will see it with their own eyes. And it's something that I unfortunately saw, you know, and I just wish that I always love to have people to have experiences, right? Because then you grow from them. But this is something I don't wish on my children, you know.
Sure.
And so,
And sorry
no,
to
please,
cut you
please.
off. I mean, but I mean, I really appreciate that perspective, you know, from someone who had that experience from fleeing from a zone of deep conflict. And in Mexico, we haven't experienced that kind of social instability yet. I mean, I'm sure that people listen to horror stories that are true, happen in Mexico. That I mean, but they are not like concentrated in a singular area. It's like all around. But what I wanted to say is that in my experience, Adnan, there are events that can very rapidly and very easily shatter the very petty differences that you know, distance people and separate them and try to go into camp A and camp B, and between us and them, red and blue, you know, yellow and whatever. uh, like for example, in 2017, you know, in September 19, we had a major earthquake here in Mexico. And I don't know if you've ever lived in a area of active seismic
St.
activity,
Louis
but
says it's not heavy, but they have them so often.
exactly. But here in Mexico, where I live, you don't feel quakes of that intensity so regularly. But man, when that happened, when you get into one of those, it's and I've experienced them twice in my life. Interestingly enough, on the same date, September 19, but 2 different years: 1985 when I was 13 to 2017 when I was, I don't know, 40 something. And what happens in the aftermath when people see the devastation, uh, and you see, obviously, everybody's afraid. Everybody experienced it. It's different than a pandemic, because in a pandemic you hear, oh yeah, so and so got the virus, and or their mother died, or you know, they got sick, but it hasn't happened to you. With an earthquake, it happens to everybody, obviously on different intensity, but it happens to everybody. And when you see what you see afterwards is this move toward a need to do something, to go and help out, and is beautiful. The seeing strangers coming to collection centers because they need to collect water and they need to collect food, supplies, medicines, band-aids, whatever, and they're going to go to place to deliver them, and people gather them very spontaneously and say, "Hey, what can I do? I'm here. What do you need? I'm who needs help? Okay. Oh, you need me to go and move that? Okay, go." And and you live that, you live through that, and that is quite uplifting. So that is one of the things that give me hope. That, I mean, it's kind of like a downer, the idea that we need things like natural
Right.
disasters, earthquakes or floods, for in order to bring the best out of people. But that is the human nature,
Right. Right.
right? So I mean, so there's that, I mean, and unfortunately it seems that that's where we are headed because of climate change. And I guess some people go and see the UFO phenomenon and say, oh, the aliens are going to help us and they're going to bring us to the next dimension, the next level of vibration, whatever. No, I mean, you better think that no one is going to help us. We are going to have to help ourselves. And maybe after we learn to help ourselves, after we learn to, you know, see past petty, you know, differences. Oh, I believe in this, you believe in that. I pray to this God, you pray to the other one. I I identify with this gender which you don't believe in, or I voted for the other guy. After we set those ideas aside and say, you know what, these lines that our great grandparents drew on a map, they are bullshit, and we probably should erase them. And after we said we are one people, and this is the only planet that we have, Elon Musk says whatever he wants. This is the only one, the only planet we know of in which the human race can live. Maybe after that, the guys from the other side will say, ah, finally, you monkeys got it. Now we can finally, get to have a one-to-one relation with you
Hmm.
guys. Finally, the conversation can begin.
Right. Okay.
That is my hope.
Well, so I basically just want to finish with this one, and there's plenty of people chatting, and I appreciate everyone. But it
Oh,
seems like
great.
that Fabrici and Hazel have questions that are very engaged in it. So thank you both. But it just basically want to finish up with the question from Fabrici saying something about Mayans and UFOs. Maybe if you can maybe
Mm,
talk about that, and then we can finish up the show with that, if that's okay with you.
sure.
Okay.
Thank you. And this has been a blast. I have a great time,
Me
Adnan.
too. I'm glad
Uh,
you do
get,
as well.
Thank you. And getting back to the question, Mayans and UFOs. Well, surely we've all seen at one point of our lives, something related to Eric von Daniken and ancient aliens, and this stone slab of this Mayan dude, which seems to be riding some kind of like rocket,
Right, right.
and that's been in the cover of who knows how many books from how many languages, talking about how, yeah, the Mayans had contact with ancient aliens. uh, and I used to believe that too. Obviously then you grow older, you learn more, and say, well, no, actually that is a very symbolic depiction of a guy who actually lived We have his remains. We know his name. His name was Pacal. He used to be the ruler of the Mayan city of Palenque. You have to remember, guys, when people talk about the Mayan Empire, it's more akin to the Greek Empire than the Romans, in the sense that the Mayans divided the Sams into city-states, right? So there was Palenque, and there was Uxmal, and there was Petén, and all these great cities that were ruled by a different how or ruler. That was how they called themselves, a how. So there's this guy, who ruled that place, and then he got buried in that tomb, and that representation is him depicted as the corn dog. Sorry, the corn god, the corn god, or like it's the typical representation of the fertility god rising from the underworld. Just like Jesus Christ. All these rites or these myths about fertility and spring and the bringing of the crops. So this is the corn god rising from the underworld to the upper world, climbing the tree of life. That weird kind of like rocket that we see there, it's only our modern 21st century perception, because all of us has watched uh, Return of the Jedi, and we saw Luke Skywalker and Leia riding through those speed bikes through the forest of Endor, and that's why we see, oh well, yeah, that's a speed bike. Well, no, that's our modern interpretation of that, the same way that we keep interpreting things about the ancient world using our modern sensibilities. Now, does that mean that the Mayas had no contact with what we will call aliens? No, that's not what I'm saying. I mean, surely, like other ancient civilizations, they had myths about uh, non-human intelligences, and I'm very particularly interested in their legends about what some people call the Alushe or Alushab, which are kind of like the Irish fairy folk. These are like little people, right? That sometimes are depicted in their artwork, their stonework or their codexes, and there are very interesting legends about these, let's call them Mayan fairy folk, interacting with the Mayas. Like, for example, there's a story of one of those little guys that was tasked with building a pyramid, in order to get married with a princess, something like that. It's almost like a Mesoamerican fairy tale, and this guy managed to build it, according to the legend, in a single day. And you hear that, and it's not that you have to believe it, but it sounds so similar to stories coming from other lores from other countries, like I said, the Celtic lore, or for example, the lore of the Hebrews. The idea that the Temple of Solomon were created by angels, right? Were built by the angels using the knowledge of Hiram, the architect that was supposed to be the founder of the Masonic Lodge or whatever. And yeah, I mean, it's important to try not to uh, distort the legacy of these cultures. I mean, if whatever you saw in Ancient Aliens, that TV series, take that with a mountain of salt, a Mount Everest of salt. Nevertheless, yeah, sure, these people, they had knowledge that was very advanced, for their time, especially mathematical knowledge. And yeah, surely, like us, they probably had contact with non-human intelligence, especially, I feel, uh, by the use of entheogenic methods, using drugs, using altered states of consciousness. To me, that is a far more interesting way of contacting non-human intelligences than the B movie, kind of like sci-fi need of the alien having to land in a rocket, and you need to make the landing strip so the rocket can land. And that sounds so, you know, uh, surely there were probably, if you're truly advanced, you don't really need to copy our very rudimentary methods of transport, right? You don't need a space shuttle if you're really, really an advanced civilization, right? So I don't know. I mean, yeah, there are a lot of interesting stories coming from the Mayas, coming from the Aztecs. If you ever get a chance to visit Mexico, I highly, highly recommend visiting Teotihuacan, the city where men became gods, which is truly, truly fantastic. It's apparently, or is still regarded as the most ancient city in the Americas, and you get to see, or you climb the pyramid of the sun, the pyramid of the moon, and you feel, well, yeah, these guys have really, really impressive knowledge. Was that knowledge imparted by alien beings? Maybe, or maybe it was imparted by an even older civilization, or maybe these guys managed to get into some kind of like altered state of consciousness that provided all the answers for them, so they could build those great temples. These guys weren't perfect, though, of course. If you learn about Teotihuacan, one of the things that the archaeologists tell you is that that city, as great as it was, eventually was abandoned because there was some kind of like social unrest, or some kind of like upheaval, some kind of revolt of the lower classes that kind of like destroyed the city. There was some kind of big fire, and nobody knows what happened, but obviously the city eventually ended up being abandoned, right? And that, I feel, is a great metaphor, for our cities. The best way to start, or to go with some kind of like sci-fi dystopic Hollywood movie, is to show uh, New York, or the like in the Planet of the Apes, the Statue of Liberty destroyed, and we see that. Some part of us says, well, that will never happen to us because we are the advanced ones. Well, no, I mean, if it happened to Teotihuacan, it could certainly happen to us. So I guess, I don't know, what I'm going with this is, there's a lot of great knowledge that is to be gained from looking at the past, to try not to fall into their same mistakes. But also, we have to give those cultures their due credit. Not everything that was amazing about the past was has to be attributed to ancient aliens. In fact, probably none of it should be attributed to ancient aliens. We know how the Egyptians built the pyramids. The big question to me is not how they built it, but why. And also, to me, the big question about all these temples is why they needed to build them. Chichen Itza, like one of the greatest cities of the Mayas, the Great Pyramid of Kukulkan, the feather serpent, is built right on top of a cenote, which is one of these sacred wells of water. Who in their right mind will build a temple right on top of a well of water. Why will you do it? And obviously they had a reason for it. And if you learn the etymology of the word itzai, which is how those descendants of the Mayans call themselves, itzai means water wizards. So these guys had some deep knowledge we may not have an inkling about. May have something to do with ancient aliens, maybe not, but yeah, there's something to be learned there. And we are learning more and more now using our modern technology, that we're finding more cities of the Mayas scattered where we only thought there were jungles, that we thought, oh yeah, the Mayas were just a few cities. No, we're actually finding cities all around the Central America, and we're also finding cities in the Amazons where we thought that only nomadic tribes, Amazonian, Indians that are hunter gatherers lived. No, we're actually finding very advanced uh, uh, urban centers there. There's a lot to be learned, and I'm sure that if returning to the previous questions, one thing that I'm sure of is that 5 years from now we're going to learn a whole lot more about our past than what we knew, or what we know today.
RPJ, that's a great wrap up. I really appreciate it. Again, thank you so much for being on and sharing, everything that you have. And, I'm glad we got to connect again. Um, so I hope maybe in the future we can do this hopefully sooner next time, maybe if you're okay
Sure.
with that. And
Yeah, at least sooner than 7 years.
right, we should do, every 7 years we'll just do an interview. How about that? Well,
Exactly.
thank you. I can't thank you enough. And I'm sure everyone else watching would appreciate your perspective too. So, everyone else watching, please check out RPJ's website and all that he does with that. RPJ, the Grail website is, do they search for your name to see the articles that you've written? Okay.
Yes, yeah. There's only two main writers on that website. Is Greg Taylor, the owner of the site, myself, Red Pill Junkie. You will easily see who wrote what. And if I may, if you go to the site and if you read and you find interesting what you find, what you see, if you can find it that you can want us to support us, we have a Patreon page. We will greatly appreciate any kind of support you could give us. Even $1 a month will be greatly appreciated. This is something that that Greg Taylor has been doing since the 1990s. The Daily Grail is one of the longest running websites about paranormal alternative news out there in the internet. So if you can help us out, I will greatly appreciate it. We are trying to prepare a lot of cool content for our Patreon subscribers, not just the content of the page. We're also thinking about having interviews with authors, videos, also giving away books, the kind of books that we publish on our publishing company, the Daily Grail Publishing Company. For example, one of the things that we have recently released is a 50th year anniversary edition of Passport to Magonia, and these are books that are signed by Jacques Vallée. So, and this is a very limited edition of only 300 copies. So if you are a collector of rare books about ufology, this is something that you will definitely like to add to your book collection. And as for myself, well, I mean, aside from the Daily Grail, there's my other website, absurdbydesign.com. Like I said, is like my art gallery. This is where people can contact me if they want to hire me to create some kind of art commission, or maybe to design a book cover. I've designed the covers of some of my friends, like Greg Bishop, Adam Gorightly, Susan Demeter, Robbie Graham. I'm trying to improve the quality of the design in UFO related books, one book at a time. It's a labor of love, but somebody has got to do it. And yeah, I mean, that's where people can find me. And if you also they want to, there's also ways to contact me if you have uh, other types
You
of
know, I wish
questions.
I forgive me. I wish I would have thought of you a while back when I had this concept or this idea in my head where scientists, they're so focused on the nuts and bolts, and the aliens are like pretty much here. All we got to do is just turn around and greet them, so to say. Well, I was trying to find. I was looking for an artist, and I found somebody to sketch it out and make it into a T-shirt where there's a scientist looking at the footprints of an alien, and the alien
Mm.
standing behind him saying, "Excuse me," and the scientist says, it says, I forgot what he says, something like, "Leave me alone, I'm looking for aliens," or something like that.
Right.
Anyway, so I definitely have some other future ideas, and that I want to kind of put out there, and I'm glad you said that. I really would like to then reach out to you and see if you would be interested. Not many,
Oh, I'll
maybe
be glad to.
one or two other shirts that I just had kind of
Sure.
mind. I mean, I can draw myself, but I have so much stuff going on that if I can just give that to someone else to help out, that would be great. So I'll keep you in mind
Hmm.
for sure. So yeah, I certainly
Thank you.
hope people check out your site, and consider donating, and you have done great work, and that's why I wanted to talk to you as well today. So I'm glad you were able to
Thank you.
share your vast knowledge. And again, I really mean it. I hope we get to do this again in the future, and then go more into the research side of things. Where today we kind of exchange perspectives, and so
Hmm.
I hope everyone else enjoyed. I'm sure they did. And so again, check out RPJ's websites. RPJ, again, thank you so much. We stayed way longer than initially anticipated, but I'm glad you did. And so everyone else watching, tune in next week for Open Lines at 7. I'm not sure if I will have an interview for webcast for you to drop on Wednesday, but I'll see. I'm working on something. If it works out, you'll see it on Wednesday. If not, it'll just be 7 p.m. Central Time Open Lines. And again, if you go to Telegram, you can use Telegram to basically sign up, find a UFO Hub group, and then wait for the voice chat, and we can chat. Last time I think we did a 3 hour where people were sharing their stories and experiences, and I found it awesome, and it seems like a lot of other people did too. So everyone, RPJ, thank you. Everyone watching, thank you very much, and you guys enjoy your evening.
Gracias.